Hello, everybody. My name is Steve Kennen, and I am the owner and president of Proactive IT here in Charlotte, North Carolina. And this is my contribution to the National Cybersecurity Alliance's Cybersecurity in a Flash series for this year's Cybersecurity Awareness Month, October, and we're in the middle of it. My best advice, be prepared. So cybersecurity, there's a lot of technology, there's a lot of advice out there. But really at the base of it all is just get your ducks in a row. And so where I'd like to start my quick 5-minute tour of the issues is with how do the bad guys get in these days? What are the most frequent ways that they're getting into our small business networks? And the first is users making mistakes, right? Phishing attacks, clicking on links and emails, some other method. But at the end of the day, it's about users doing something that they shouldn't have done, albeit inadvertently. And then the other way is kind of like the pipeline attack earlier this year that we here in Charlotte felt pretty strongly because we were without gas for a week. The bad actors compromised some unknown vulnerability, something that they weren't aware of. In that case, it was an unknown VPN that wasn't secured with multi-factor authentication. So this is typically how they're getting into your networks. So what do you do about it? At a high level, you train your users, right? Human beings are human beings. All the technology in the world can't stop a human being that's determined to do something, even if it's, through an inadvertent action. Typically, we'll use security and awareness training and testing, where we're providing cybersecurity training to our customers' users. And then we're testing them with phishing campaigns to see whether there are people who need more training, right? So keep those users trained because that's the number one vulnerability. And then the other one is regularly scan for and fix problems. Right? The pipeline attack happened because there was a VPN that IT wasn't aware of. So what do you do about that? Well, you do external vulnerability scanning and you do internal vulnerability scanning. It's not rocket science, it's just process. The other piece of advice that I share with people a lot is that any technology is only as good as it's well managed, right? And my point there is lots of vendors will tell business people that, oh, technology A or technology B is the silver bullet to the problem. And the answer is it never is. Because if it's not well managed, it won't do its job. And so let me give you some really specific examples. Right? Most businesses understand to build good castle walls to keep the bad guys out, right? What does that consist of? A firewall. We particularly like unified threat management or UTM firewalls because they do other things besides standard firewall activity. They do intrusion detection, they do antivirus screening, malware protection, that kind of stuff. You would also typically have antivirus software or endpoint security software in place. But if you don't know that equipment, those technologies are doing their job, and if you aren't managing that and staying on top of it, if those firewalls aren't getting their firmware updates, if that endpoint security software isn't verified regularly, then the technology can stop working or stop working as intended. And so be aware, a lot of vendors will sell technology as if the technology is the solution, and it's part of the solution. But the real solution is the technology plus the disciplined implementation of the technology to make sure that it's there and continues to be there for your business when you need it. The same thing applies to good backup and recovery, right? There are good principles for backup and recovery, multiple copies, on-site and off-site copies. Other things that we think are extremely important in backups are that the on-site copy should be hardened, right? For example, a lot of businesses will use USB drives that they rotate off-site periodically as their on-site and off-site backups. If a USB drive is plugged into a computer that gets attacked by cryptoware, what happens to the USB drive's data? It gets encrypted, right? So you got to be careful. You got to make sure your backups are hardened against the kinds of attacks that make you most vulnerable. The same thing applies to the offsite copy. You want to have multiple copies, and your offsite copy needs to be protected as well. We use hardening for our offsite copies. And we're also very careful to do what's called air gapping for maintaining an offline copy so that there's no way to get to the data, or that the way to get to the data is so narrow that it's improbable it'll ever get compromised. And then the last piece of this is the same thing. Backups aren't any good if you don't know they're going to work when you need them. They need to be tested and managed, right? Regular backup testing. It can be automated testing. It can be human testing. We use a combination of the two. But if your backups aren't regularly tested, you cannot be confident they're going to be there when you need them. In the end, you just got to assume it's going to happen and act accordingly. So the last thing that we worry about a lot is what happens when someone gets over, under, or through those castle walls, right? If the firewall and the antivirus software doesn't stop the attack and someone gets inside the network, unbeknownst to you or to your IT, how do you know they're there? And right now, the state of the art is two pieces of software with hopefully a security operations center that participates in monitoring and managing it. One is called Endpoint Detect and Respond, also called Manage, Detect and Respond. It's next generation endpoint software. It uses behavioral-based and artificial intelligence-based algorithms to look for the signs of something unusual on your network and to help stop it when it happens. And the other one is called SIM, Security Information and Event Management. It's also software that takes the millions and millions of lines of logging that servers and firewalls produce, puts it in a database, and uses, again, behavioral analysis and artificial intelligence to look for the signs that something is going on the network that's out of the ordinary and shouldn't be happening. And so if your business does all of these things, and then also make sure that you have your breach response plan in place and test it with periodic, what we will do is tabletop exercises. Let's think it through and see what we've missed. If you do all of these things, then the odds are very good that you'll be in a good position to not get compromised, to not have a breach. And if you have a breach, to respond to the breach. So that's my cybersecurity in a flash contribution. And I hope that you all found it valuable.